Hello, I'm Philip Stoten. I'm at Electronica 2024 and I'm joined by Lou from IMI. Lou, pleasure to meet you. We actually met earlier in the lift and we were polite and nice.
Very cordial.
It was good. You've been 4 or 5 months in the job. You were working for IMI as a consultant before. What have you seen? What are you thinking in terms of plans? You took over a pretty tricky time, so it's certainly been exciting, shall we say?
Yeah, it's tricky. I think geopolitically, right?
And not going to get less so.
No, it's not going to get less so, and I think it's tricky even from a market perspective. So especially in automotive, trying to figure out what's going to happen and where it's going to happen, because that's important. And it was tricky at IMI, right?
Yeah.
Because IMI had a guy that was the CEO and really the father of the company in art, and he was there for 20 plus years. So coming in, I knew I had to make a bunch of changes, and I had to make those changes fast, and so that people would not have to suffer through a long process. So I think we're at the end of it now.
Really?
We went over the last 5 months and made a lot of important changes to the organizational structure, to the people in some of the critical positions, and to our footprint.
Right? And I think the footprint one is the first one I want to tackle, because I think when I look at what we used to do in the industry, which was chase low-cost labor around the world and focus on wherever it was cheapest, to a pendulum swing towards regionalization. Pendulum swing, which is probably going to go further towards protectionism beyond regionalization, and we need to be thoughtful about that. How do you redesign your footprint to reflect a better solution that is maybe a little bit less China-centric? And then how do you look forward to actually have a solution that's agile enough to deal with whatever's coming next?
Great question. I'm a person that likes fewer, larger facilities, sites, because I think they can be more competitive, less overhead, and overhead is a hard thing to tackle at a small site. And if your overhead at a site is any higher than say 9%, you'll really struggle to compete. So and as you mentioned, freight rates, they went from the Long Beach Container Index out of Shanghai went from $1,500
sub 2,000 to 15,000
COVID. Now it's 15,000. Went up 10x, right? So that really hurts when you're building what are larger sub assemblies for customers. So I think now where we are in Mexico, the USMC pact was written by Trump, right?
So hopefully he's going to respect that.
So you hope that, because it's kind of NAFTA too.
It is.
So I'm hoping that just gets left alone. And so our facility in Mexico is in really good shape now. We've got a new management team there. We have almost 40% open capacity, which we're going to use to field a lot of new inquiries. Since this situation, the election last week, we've gotten more inquiries from customers who are in the other classifications, tariff classifications, that with China, that were in the 5%, 7.5%, and 15%, not 25%.
25 or 60%.
I mean, I think the first day maybe that Trump takes office, he'll push those other categories and the exemption categories to 25. And so all of those businesses that have products in those categories will need to get out of China. So I'm looking forward to that, certainly in Mexico, and then I think the nice thing about Mexico is the location to the final customer. We still do have to bring in a lot of product from Asia.
For the bill of materials.
Just because it's hard to find as competitive source in North America. And I would tell you that the other site we have is the Philippines, which is another really good option for customers. Really, really competitive labor rates globally. really great, well-trained staff.
Yeah.
Language.
Yeah.
Everybody speaks English in the
Philippines.
Philippines.
The talent pool is really good in the Philippines.
It's really good.
Young.
It's young and it's energetic,
Yeah.
and they are resourceful. This is my first time doing business in the Philippines, being there with a site, and I am so pleasantly surprised in that. And then, lastly for us is Eastern Europe.
Yeah.
And our sites in Serbia and Bulgaria are probably our best operating sites.
Yeah.
They do a fantastic job. Our customers, if you look at customer satisfaction, our customers in Europe are happier with our sites in Europe than we enjoy in any other region.
Yeah.
So now I haven't talked about China.
Well, I was coming to that. Are we downsizing in China? Are we looking at China for China only? Or
yeah, I mean, we're downsizing in China, but the amazing thing, our sites in China, we have 4 of them, are run by some great people that work their cans off and get the job done really well. But there's just too much asset chasing too little business, right? So the price points now are terrible, especially for SMD, business. So SMT, Wave, any kind of final assembly, really hard to compete there now. So really, we're going to probably take 40% of our footprint out there over the course of the next 6 months. And then I think you'll see with those changes kind of all made, we're closing down our U.S. facility. And the reason we're doing that is I just don't see an ability to compete with Mexico from the U.S. And we don't quite have a large enough facility in the U.S. for it to really make sense. I think the players that have really big facilities in the U.S. now and have the potential to get bigger, I think they have a play, especially with the aerospace and other domestic businesses that require you to build in the U.S. But I'm still bullish on Mexico. And I think Mexico can be a really great place. And we have both plastics, we have both mechanical and electrical in Mexico. So it gives us kind of a leg up where we can do connectors, we can do metal stamping, we can do plastics, and then we can do the traditional SMT through hole and box build.
I was in your Guadalajara facility, I guess last spring, and impressed by what was going on there. And I think Philip had first come over from China and was kind of shaking things up there and really making them much more efficient. So there was a move in the right direction. And I have to say, what you're doing with the footprint is exactly what I would see as the changes that needed to be made.
We needed to take 2% of our overhead, and at a $1 billion plus company, removing 2% of your overhead is hard, right? Because you have to start cutting into some muscle. It's not all fat. So, but those tough choices have been made.
And that process has been
and we're
done,
through it.
And you're through it, and you're looking forward. So when you look at 2025, and as I mentioned, I think there's that requirement to right size and balance your footprint, but there's also the requirement to make that footprint a little bit more agile for the future, because we don't know what tariffs are going to come along. We don't know what trade wars are going to happen. We don't know what China's relationship with the rest of the world is going to be on an ongoing basis. How do you create something that's more agile, and what are your expectations in 2025? What are the other maybe tweaks that you need to make now you've made those big changes?
So I think the other, big tweak we're making isn't so much about the footprint or changing the footprint going forward, because I think our footprint that we have now will be the footprint we'll stick with for the next 5 years. It's things like sourcing. 70% of the value we bring our customers is purchased outside our buildings, right? So you can't underestimate how important it is to be good at doing that, right? And I think a lot of EMS companies don't put enough focus in investing in the very best people, the most experienced people, the most aggressive and hardworking people. So we've really rebuilt our sourcing organization with people that are from my past, both mechanical and electrical. And I think we have a really good team in place that now is going to challenge our customers. So every time our customers give us a BOM or an RFQ, our sourcing team, together with our sales and program management teams, are going into the customer and challenging them on every single aspect of the BOM, right? To help educate them about, you know, what components they should be or could be using, right?
Don't use that. There's a single source. Don't use that. It's going to go obsolete.
Correct.
Yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
But what we're also finding in the supply chain is digital transformation. We're seeing much better tools. So actually having a more aggressive team, but actually giving them
the right tools.
Them some of those new tools, that new tool set.
I mean,
really
Silicon
exciting.
Expert. I don't know if you know Silicon Expert, but I'm a believer, and I'm a guy that says, you know, everybody's got to have that. All of our key sourcing people on the electrical side need to have that. And then there are similar tools on the mechanical side, but the mechanical side really is about people knowing. And some of that's me, right? I've been doing business in the mechanical world for 40 years. So when it comes to injection molding and plastics, that, you know, you would need to know to make alternative suggestions to customers. Because some customers say, oh, geez, I need to use a polycarbonate. I'll go to Lexan. You know, it's the name they know. Right? Where there are multiple other suppliers out there that can be not 10% better in cost, but 40% better in cost, right? Wow. So these are things
that's game changing.
It's game changing, and you got to know this stuff, right? And you have to not be shy. Because sometimes a customer's first impulse will be, quote the BOM we gave you, right? And then you have to say, okay, I'll quote that BOM, but then I'm going to show you some alternatives, and I'm going to put a value on each of those alternatives. And look, that's how you make money in this business. You don't make money in the value add necessarily, and that's how you keep customers, because customers love it. When you help them reduce their overall cost, that not just that 30% value add, but the 70% material.
And Lou, if you can, on top of that, if you can mitigate risk, you can show them a better, more reliable, more sustainable supply chain. You can cut down costs of logistics. You can add huge amount of value there. You're absolutely right. I always think you have two jobs as an EMS company. You're making stuff for them. That's kind of a given. That's a bit of a me too. But you're managing their supply chain. You're managing all that material complexity. And that's the big skill of the EMS industry.
Oh my gosh. And planning, I can also add, you know, while there's, you know, this whole sourcing side of it, then there's the customer service, planning, buying side of it. And oh my gosh, that is a challenge. And in the world we just left, which was this NCNR, you know, no cancel, no change, edicts that came from, oh my gosh, 2 years. And that has wreaked havoc on the inventory and inventory management. Because how can you forecast 2 years? You can't. None of our customers can predict.
And whatever they were telling you was clearly wrong.
No, look at us, right? So yeah, we're really in a place. You know, one of the things that I've been trying to get together with the other CEOs at EMS companies is to say, hey, let's band together, especially the mid-sized guys, and pool our inventory and make that inventory available to each other.
The inventory overhang,
from different sites. Because if you look at somebody like Foxconn, they're so big that they can trade amongst themselves with all the different business they have. Well, you know, ourselves, you know, somebody like Benchmark, somebody like SMTC, all these mid-range guys have to be able to kind of get together and be able to sell off excess inventory. So this is something that's in the works.
It makes perfect sense, doesn't it? You've probably got an inventory overhang on something they've been searching for and they can't find.
Correct.
Did you come in with a big inventory
We did. I did. Yes, I did.
You managed to get.
I am
knock the top off of that.
That is something that's on my mind every day. Yeah, it's a work in progress, and it's something that is always a give and take with the customer. Customers don't want to accept that they have liability for it. We don't, as an EMS middleman, want to accept that liability. So there's a little bit of give and take.
There's a bit of tension there, isn't
there's a little bit of tension there.
I think what also happened in the supply chain issue is the EMS industry broke some of those relationships with component distribution. It felt like component distribution was enjoying the crisis and perhaps making a little bit too much money.
And in some cases, the IC companies selected one distributor. They had an exclusive distributor, and then you're stuck having to buy that specified component from one source.
Yeah, from one source. And that doesn't make any sense, does it? No. So I think there's some repair needed to be done there. So, one of the things that you're going to need to do, or hopefully you've already started doing, is kind of thinking about that supply side of the supply chain. How do you build new good relationships with distribution? How do you get value from them? 20 years ago they were a bank and a warehouse. Now it's something completely different. They have to show us value again, I think.
Yeah, they have to show us value, and that I think means helping with cash flow, because all of our customers are pushing us for more terms.
You're just getting squeezed in the middle, yeah.
And then distributors don't want to provide terms. And as distributors get bigger and have more power, then it gets harder to push them. So now what we have to do is go find smaller distributors that are aggressive.
Yeah.
And then sometimes that means we have to push our customers hard to choose different parts.
Yeah.
Because sometimes the part that the customer wants is only available at one or two distributors, right?
Yeah,
so there's a lot of that. And I think there's also a lot of, with this geopolitical thing happening, right? There's a lot of changes, I think, coming in the semiconductor and IC world, right? Where the East is now producing some pretty competitive, pretty compelling silicon and IC and passives and discretes.
Yeah.
So that are really competitive.
Yeah.
And I think if the West isn't very careful,
attentive,
they're going to find themselves in a tricky position in a few years.
Yeah.
So, and that's important to us to promote. Yeah. If the Western companies aren't going to be more flexible in their terms.
Yeah. I like what you're doing with the business. I like what you're doing with buddying up with a few other companies to actually create some scale that's going to give you some additional value. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep talking to us, because I think it's exciting times ahead for IMI, and thanks for coming by.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.